And then we'll go into families in Dreambox. And we'll finish out with a Q&A time because I realize we've got some folks who've been using Dreambox most of the year and some who may be new. So we'll make sure that we answer any questions you may have, even if they don't pertain to our major topics for the day during that Q&A time. So we'll just dive right in. Starting with the updates, we have 3 big updates to show you. And I'm actually going to hop into the dashboard to show you all 3 of them. So I'm going to open up a dashboard account here on my screen. And you might have noticed this as you were logging into your accounts and working with your students. But we've got 3 big updates. First one is student login cards. So I know one big request that we've had from teachers recently is, it's great that my kids have pretty easy logins or can have the option for both either picture password or text password. It would be really great if I could just print out a card and hand it to my students. To actually have that capability. So when you go into your dashboard, you select a class. So I just selected the class card. And then next to the purple icon with the desk on it, it's going to be the edit button. Whenever you go into the edit button, remember, just as a quick reminder, and you go to the roster tab, if you need to make any changes to the picture passwords, you can do that. Go ahead, Larissa. Sorry about that. Can you go ahead and pipe in about the login cards?
I was going to wait till you were finished, but currently we set all the accounts to picture passwords K2. If a teacher like in 2nd grade wanted to change it to text password, they could have, but there's some schools that maybe did that, but most don't have that. Mm-hmm. But I think this will be really helpful for next year as we'll move more towards Clever. And so it'll be a different login. But right now, if it's the picture password, the cards won't be that helpful, right?
Actually, the card will actually have the picture password on it as well. Let me show you all real quick. I'm going to exit. And when you go to the roster tab, there's a print student login card. Mm-hmm. And this particular class is a fictional class, so they don't actually have student login cards or haven't logged into their accounts yet. But if they had selected their password, the picture matching the picture that the student uses to log in would appear on the login card. So that should actually be helpful for them for this school year too.
So the name like dog or, would be there.
Oh, actually the picture itself should appear on the card. So if I had the ladybug would appear on my card.
Okay. Then.
Yeah, which is helpful for our students who are not at that reading readiness stage yet.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No, that's great clarifying question. And if you are interested in using a text password, I'm just going to go over that real quick for everyone. So I am in a classroom and go to the edit button. If you want to change the password to a text password, you go to password type, which is going to be the 4th tab. And then I just use the drop down to change from a picture password to a text password. And of course, anytime I make changes there, I can click save. And then I need to toggle back to the roster tab. Now I believe that the default for the password is going to be just password, but you can change this to any password that you want for each student in your class. It does need to be at least 4 letters long. So you can change that for any student in that last column there. After you make a change, I change this password here, I just click the green save button.
Just one caveat, we use Compass Lexia passwords, so you will have to type those in yourself if you want those. Those aren't automatically currently in for your text password. And then if you get a new student in your class, it will assign them like tree or some random word. You'll have to go in and change it to the Lexia password, which is, we use the initials and the year of birth.
Ah, yes. Good point. Thanks, Sarissa.
Yep.
All right, so that's our first update. Second update is about the assigning lessons. So when we go to the Assign Focus tab, and you want to make an assignment for your students, you click the Add Assignment button that's on the right-hand side of the screen. We now have actually, for an assignment, you'll be able to choose, and this is a sample account, it's not showing up in my, let me go to a different class. Sometimes our sample accounts don't show me everything, of course. But when you go to add an assignment in your accounts, and actually I've done this, I'm looking through one of yours recently, there's actually going to be a section here. Instead of saying select, you'll be able to toggle either through topic or standards. So standards will tell you the Common Core standards, and you get to make those assignment by Common Core standard. Or if you go to topic, it's going to be Dreambox learning units. Oh, you know what? I know why it's not there yet. I have to be in Common Core standards. There we go. Okay, so there's topic if I want to assign the Common Core, the Dreambox learning units, which are a bit broader than some of the Common Core standards. You see that the categories are a bit more broad, and then you can select lesson groups from there. If you'd like to stick to the standard, then you can go to standard, and this allows you to assign to Common Core standards. And this was just a request that we had from teachers because they wanted to be able to toggle pretty quickly and easily back and forth between the Common Core standards, which narrow into those specific skills for that Common Core standard, or the Dreambox learning units, which tend to be a bit more broad, which might be a good option if you're deciding to do a long-term assignment where you want a kid to work through a larger concept and really get a larger sequence of lessons. So that's the second update. The last update is something you're going to find when you go back into your classroom and when you go into the overview report. So here I'm in the overview report, and you notice that now some of my students have an orange triangle next to their names. These orange triangles, you'll notice, appear next to students' names here in the overview tab, as well as in the navigation pane. Now, you're all probably familiar with that being just in the navigation pane. So when it appears in the navigation pane, there are actually 3 different reasons why it might appear. It could be because the student hasn't had sufficient time in Dreambox, so is below 15 minutes in Dreambox. Maybe they've completed less than 2 minutes and 2 lessons in the last week, or the student is having trouble completing lessons with proficiency. We realize that's a lot to say with one little symbol, and some teachers really wanted to pull out the kids who were having trouble completing lessons with proficiency. So we've done that for you here in the center of the screen. So now when you go to the overview tab and you see a student who has an orange triangle next to their name in the tab, like Lauren here, it's going to tell me that that student is having trouble completing a lesson or a series of lessons with proficiency. So that's the true for Lauren and for Rita in this class. So that really quickly lets me know that these students are having trouble. All right. And just let me know as we go along if you have any questions or anything to add with some of these updates. And I love that, Denise, you're right. She's talking about assigning a standard and versus topics. For those long-term assignments, it is great for RTI. So my suggestion, if you're going to assign and make an assignment for your students for RTI purposes, my suggestion would be to do it usually in Dreambox learning units, because it is going to give a student a broader range of lessons to work through and really challenge them. So, okay, so we're going to go on, and next we're going to talk about how to use Dreambox for decision making in your classroom. So we're going to go back into our dashboard and go back to our classroom. So first thing that I want to go over is just what some of the reporting in that overview tab for your classroom means. There really is quite a bit of data here that I can really use to help me gauge my instruction for each learner in my classroom. So first thing that I might want to take a look at is this standards met and standards progressed in. That gives me a really nice snapshot of which students are making big leaps in the work that they're doing in Dreambox and which students are making a bit slower progress. And I can also see where those leaps are for those students and their progress. So right now in the last 7 days, I can see which standards the students in this class have completed. And when we say that they've completed something, that means that they have been through all of that content using multiple manipulatives and models. They've had lots of different situations to apply this concept, skill, or strategy that we're trying to teach them. And they've shown that they've mastered this topic or this skill or standard, okay? So those are the standards that they've met. When a student has progressed in a standard, that means that they've completed at least one lesson successfully. Now, when you complete a lesson successfully in Dreambox, that means that you have shown through a series of correct answers on the problems that you can solve solve the problems with correct answers, but also efficiency really counts in Dreambox. So we may have students who are getting to the correct answer, but it's how you get to that correct answer that's going to be really, really important, because that's going to help me become a more proficient mathematician, especially when I get into things like algebra. It's going to be very, very important. So going back to these two columns, a standard met is a standard that the student has completed. So Anita is a pretty advanced 4th grader. She's actually working on a 6th grade standard. So that's what she's completed. She's also made progress in quite a few standards in the last week. So she's working through some 4th grade, some 6th grade, and some 7th grade standards. And it's perfectly normal for kids to work through different grade levels of content. It just means that no matter what domain they're in, they're being appropriately challenged at that point in time. Now, one thing that you might notice for one of my students who is got this orange triangle next to her name, Lauren, because she's not proficient in 3 of the last 5 lessons, when I scan over to her standards met and standards progressed in, she has a 0 for both of those. That really tells me that she's really struggling in Dreambox and not making forward progress. That's just another way to use this data to see if their students are moving forward in Dreambox as they're working on the lessons. And whenever I do see a student who's not making progress in the standards, like Lauren, I would want to click on her name. We're going to do this real quickly. And then go into her activity tab and see what it is she's done when she's played in Dreambox. So I can see the last time that Lauren logged in was Sunday, May 6th. And each of these cards under Sunday, May 6th tell us the lessons that she opened when she was working in Dreambox. So she was working on simplifying an expression in 2 lessons, and it looks like she's struggling through that concept. You see Dreambox noted that by the orange text with this little orange triangle on it. So one thing I noticed is this is a teacher assigned lesson, so I might want to take a look at that assignment with her by clicking the play lesson button here and actually playing through the lesson with her to make sure that she knows how to use things like the help button or the hint button. And also to make sure that there's not something else that's getting in the way. If there's like some little helpful hint or negative information that I can give her to help her through that problem and then move her forward. Or I might also want to see, because this is a teacher assigned lesson and not a Dreambox suggested lesson, did I really give her the right assignment? Is this the right place for this student? Or do I need to maybe cancel the assignment for the student and give her something different to help fill in the gap that she has? So that's one way that I would use these cards to help me make sure the kids are on the right track and moving forward. I also want to glance a little bit lower and see what else she's been working on. So converting hours submitted, she's having trouble with multiplication. So she really is struggling in quite a few different areas. So I might want to pick one and see if there's some way that I can help her. And one thing that we are going to be working on, and we are actually working on right now, a bit of a project at Dreambox for the PD team is we're going to have some teacher suggested actions on these cards coming up probably somewhere around the beginning of this upcoming school year. So if you have a student who is struggling on things like multiplication as repeated addition with patterns of dots, there'll be some recommendations for teacher actions to help support that learner too. So be on the lookout for that this fall. So that is one quick way that I would use, going back to our our classroom overview report. One way that I would use the standards met and standards progressed in data to see, is a student moving forward? Are they stuck somewhere? And what can I do to help that student? Now, the other data that I like to take a look at and just check on really quickly is this proficiency. So the proficiency is going to be cumulative data from day one the student started working in Dreambox up until the present day, and it's going to be a reflection of the lessons and the standards that the student has mastered for each grade level that they've worked in Dreambox. So this happens to be a 4th grade class, by the way. The grade level that the students are in for the class is going to be in the center, and you're going to see data for one grade level below as well as one grade level above the student's assigned grade level. Now, when we see proficiency, we're going to see a number. We're going to see out of 20, out of 25. That tells you how many standards that Dreambox covers for that particular grade level. And I would pause. I know if someone just chimed in. Do y'all have a question? Okay. So underneath this in the columns for the students, you're going to see a number that tells us the number of standards that the student has met for that grade level. So when I look at Buck here, I can see that he has met 17 out of the grade 3 standards covered in Dreambox, 2 out of the grade 4 standards, and the 25 grade 4 standards, and he hasn't started to work on the 5th grade standards just yet. So that's a nice kind of a way to see really quickly who is working on grade level, who's working a bit below grade level, and who's working one grade level above. All right. Another way to look at the data, and I use this to impact what I'm doing with my students, is to look at what students are working on. So sometimes it's helpful to see, okay, I've got kids who are working on all sorts of different things that really speak to the level they need to be working on, but what are they collectively working on? So on the right-hand side in the activity tab, you're going to see a collection of items of what the students are working on, listed from the most popular to the items that you've only got maybe 1 or 2 students working on. So when I look at this list, I can see that I've got 7 students working on equivalent fractions with scaling factors. And here it lists the 7 students that are working on that particular topic. And this is actually what I like to see with this, and what I like to use this for is to help me figure out what are the popular topics that Dreambox has my students working on. And it can also be something that, I might pull a group of students because I know they're working on it in Dreambox. Maybe that's something that I know I need to work on as well. And so I can pull those groups of kids too. All right. The next place that I would go to look at where my students are is the Standards tab. Now, the Standards tab is great because it allows me to see student proficiency at any grade level. So it doesn't have to be just the grade level my students are in. So if I wanted to go back, you know what, I'm going to switch classes real quick. I'm going to go to a K through 2 class so we can see data that's more pertinent to you all. All right, here we go. So this is a 1st grade class. And here I've got my grade 1 standard selected. And we've got a grid view. So the grid view really is meant to be kind of a bird's eye view of all the standards that Dreambox covers for the grade level and where the students are. Now, the students' progress through the standards is going to be noted by indicators. The green indicator lets me know that the student has mastered that standard. The blue half moon lets me know that the student is making progress on that standard but hasn't mastered it yet. And if you're curious what kind of progress they've made, like I can see Edmundo's made progress in 6 different standards, I can hover over that little blue half moon and see his name, the grade level, and the standard that he has made progress in, and then I can see a percentage next to that. Now, so he's 87% of the way through 1.mbt.b.3. Now, 87% means that he is 87% of the way toward mastery for that particular standard. And by the way, if you're like me and you haven't memorized all of these standards just yet, don't worry, that's okay. We've got a key up here. So if you click on MBT, it's going to bring a drop down, and then I can click on 1.mbt.b.3 and see that it's about comparing two-digit numbers based on the meanings of tens and ones digits and recording the results with comparison symbols. So it's nice to have that little digital cheat sheet there too, to help you remember what those mean. Great question from Jeff. So hovering over the standard does bring the standard definition up as well. Yes. So there are 2 ways to get into that information. Now, so we did mention that the green circle means that they have mastered something. The blue half moon means that they are working toward mastery. And then there's also that empty circle. You can see that Greg's got an empty circle for 1.mbt.c.4. This means that he has not started working on the standard yet. Now, if a student hasn't started working on a standard yet, there are a couple reasons why. One, it could mean that that student just hasn't had enough time to get to that standard. But it also could mean that there's another standard that student really needs to work through in order to for them to be successful on this particular standard. So let's take a look at what the standard is all about. Okay, adding within 100. So let's say that Greg here is still working on counting 11 to 20. He's still working on counting 11 to 20. We're not going to have him work on this first grade standard just yet because it's not appropriate. So one thing I need to look at if I'm curious about why hasn't he worked on this, I need to look at the standards that he has either made progress in or that he's mastered to make sure that to see if it's a time issue or if it is just that he hasn't mastered a previous standard. Usually if it's a time issue, then I'll look at a standard that's more foundational and I'll see, oh, he's making progress in it or he's mastered it. Then that means, oh, Dreambox will get to that very soon in the cycle of lessons. If it's a proficiency issue, if he's not ready for it yet, then you'll notice that that foundational standard will not be completed. So you'll see a blue half moon or you'll see an open circle on that more foundational standard, which means there's something else he needs to work on too. So that can be really good information for me. Also, the other thing I can notice from this is just the trends and which standards most of my kids have met, which ones they're working on, or which ones they're having trouble with right now. Also, if a student is struggling through a standard, we're going to put that little orange triangle on that standard to let you know, hey, this is a standard where the student's struggling, while Dreambox is going to continue to adapt back to help that student with that area that they're struggling in. We also want to let you know because it might be something that you're teaching the student at that moment in time too, and you need to know that that student might need some extra support. So those are a few ways to use the grid view. Once again, as I said before, it's the nice bird's eye view of all of those standards. But I know so often as educators, you're looking at maybe a few standards or just one single standard that students are working on. To do that, if I want to isolate a single standard or maybe a cluster, then I can click to the grouping view and just really quickly, I use the drop down that said grid view and change to grouping view. When I change to the grouping view, it allows me to select a domain. So that's the first thing. I need to find the tab for the domain that I want to look at. So we're going to start with number and operations in base 10. And now it will show me my students' progress for the entire domain. So who hasn't started it just yet, who's working on it, who's proficient in that entire domain. That means all of the standards for that domain at the first grade level. Now I can also drill down into a cluster, so extending the counting sequence, for example, and see where my students are. Or I can go into a standard by using the drop down. So when it comes to counting to 120, now I can see that I've got 3 distinct groups of students. So the standard not started kids are the kids that when I'm planning my instruction, these may be the kids that I'm going to need to support more. Maybe they're the kids who aren't ready to count to 120 yet. Maybe there's something else that they need. Maybe they're working on at 11 to 20. So I need to also use other pieces of information that I know about these kids to make this decision. So are the kids working on something else in my classroom? Is there something else getting in the way? Is there some other teacher assessment or student assessment that I've given that gives me good information on this, where this kid needs to be? The standard in progress category, once again, has a percentage next to the student's name, and that notes the percent of the Dreambox content that they've been through with proficiency or that they've mastered. So we can see that Kenneth is about 3/4 of the way through that content, whereas Valencia is just in the beginning stages. So I might also want to use those percentages to help me further divide my students up into smaller groups. So if I was lucky enough, maybe I want to put Jacinto and Valencia in a different group. Maybe I want to put them down with these other kids in the standard not started category and group those students all together. And Kenneth and Greg are almost proficient in this particular standard in Dreambox, so maybe they need to be in a separate group. Now, the last category is the proficient and standard category. That tells us the students that have mastered this concept in Dreambox. Remember, mastery does not mean that they've just been exposed to it once or twice. It means that they've had multiple lessons, multiple situations, and lots of different opportunities to really show Dreambox that they understand this concept of counting to 120 in multiple different ways. So for these students, I may want to do a bit of a review on counting to 120, but I also might want to challenge them further and take them on to something more challenging. Now, one thing I want to point out about this view is that you can print it too. So if you want to use that to help you figure out your groups, print it out, put it in your plan book, okay? So we've gone over the grid view and the grouping view. I'm going to show you one more way to pull student data on proficiency, but I want to pause and see if anyone has any questions. If you're good, just let me know.
So Stacy, I would just recommend that when people are deciding how they're going to make small groups, to use at least several resources. I think there are times that Dreambox will give you some really good information, but also to trust in what they're seeing in terms of classroom instruction. Students are also taking the MAP assessments in many cases. So just always considering several resources as you're deciding how to group your kids in the best way.
Yes, thank you so much. And that's something that Dreambox advocates for as well. We're only one source of data. You've got so many data points on your kids. Use those. Great. All right, so I'm going to go into another way that you can look at your student data from Dreambox. And that's from the Standards tab. Whether you're in the grid view or the grouping view, you can click an export button. And that is actually going to export the student proficiency data into an Excel spreadsheet. I'm going to bring it up for you here in just a moment. There we go. And this Excel spreadsheet will import all of the student proficiency data from that moment in time that students have worked in Dreambox. So here I can see just trends in proficiency for students. So I can see if there's a particular standard where I see a lot of my students are not proficient in. And by the way, these numbers that you see here, 0 means that that no one has worked on that standard yet, 100% means all of the students have mastered that standard. And anywhere from 1 to 99 tells us the percent of the content that students on average for this tab have completed. So when it comes to, open this up a little bit more. So when it comes to things like understanding addition and putting together and adding to, and understanding subtraction as taking apart and taking from, I can see that my class on the whole is about 3/4 of the way through that content. So that's some nice information for me to have to also notice what are some trends that Dreambox is noting for me in my student proficiency. And the first tab just shows me all of the grade levels and an average for all of the students in my class. Now the data that I pulled this from was actually a grade 1 class, so if I want to, I can use the tabs at the bottom to hone in on those grade 1 standards. So I can see my students listed on the left-hand side here, and I can see for every standard how far they are through that particular standard, noting from 0 to 100. So that's another nice way to see that data really quickly in a spreadsheet, which of course you can manipulate on your own too. And that is here in the export button. Okay. All right. Now, another way that you can use this, this feature for the grouping view or the grid view from standards, so you can also add assignments from here. So we'll go from the grouping view since we're there first. You can add an assignment here by clicking the Add Assignment button and determine whether you want a short-term or long-term assignment. Remember, short-term is just to make a connection between what students are doing in the classroom and Dreambox Learning. The long-term assignment is really meant for long-term intervention for the students. And then you can choose how long you want the assignment and then, of course, the standards. When you go into the grid view, there's going to be a notebook icon that allows you to assign that particular standard right from the grid view by clicking on that notebook. And it already filled in the grade level, the domain, and the standard. And Denise just had a really great question. Our coach is able to view all the classes at a grade level to give support. So unfortunately, Denise, you can only view one class at a time. So you would have to, if I were a coach, I would have access, you probably have access to, my guess is, to the whole school or to a certain grade level. You would see the teachers, and then you would click into their specific classes, like I'm doing here, to see those classes. I hope that helps, Denise. Just let me know if you have any other questions. All right, so that leads us up to a question for you all to answer, and you're welcome to answer that, this question, either verbally, if you want to unmute yourself, or if you want to type in the text box, that's fine with me too. So how do you use Dreambox Learning dashboard data to inform your instructional practices? Or if you're not using it, how do you plan to use it or hope to use it in your classroom? Or if you're a coach with the teachers that you're working with. All right, so there's a couple great responses. So using it to check progress, minutes to spend on Dreambox and make sure that the student's not stuck on a lesson. Great, okay. Helps us inform groups and centers. It gives me feedback on my teaching. Awesome, great. And one great way to get a little feedback on how students are doing with a topic is to do a short-term assignment. Do a quick short-term assignment on something that you're teaching as a quick check-in. You get real quick feedback on the assignment, whether the student completed the assignment successfully or struggled on it. And that can also help you get more information about how those kids are doing and also figure out how to gauge your instruction to help them further. Awesome. All right, everyone. So, um, and Jeremy, let me know if you want me to go over the assigning lessons a little more in depth when we get to the Q&A section of today's session. We can go more in depth about the data and all of that too. More than happy to do that. All right. So next we're going to go into families and Dreambox. So Dreambox is not just something that you can use at your school. It can be used as students go out into the community. So I'm going to show you how students can get access to Dreambox outside of the school. So we're going to start by going into a classroom. I'm back in my class again. And next to the edit button, you're going to see a Dreambox Access Resources button. I'm going to click on that real quick. And you see this drop down has appeared. Now you all are using your own school's internet address or your iPad code to access Dreambox. Well, parents need to have that access too, so students can play at home, or if they're at the library or in a community center, they're going to need those. So here's what you can do. Underneath, where we can print student login cards, there's also an invitation letter to parents option. Now these letters can at this time be printed out either in English or in Spanish. We're going to take a look at the English letter. And this year, because you're the way that you're signing on, you're going to use this invitation letter to parents, the first one. Okay. If you decide to use Clever next year to sign on for your students, then you would use the second letter. But this year, the first one. So I'm going to click on English. I'm going to take a look at it real quick here. So this lets the parent know that they've purchased, the school has purchased Dreambox. Here is that website that they're going to need to go to access Dreambox. We do remind them that they need to have high-speed internet and they need to have Adobe Flash. Now, Dreambox is available for use on iPads, and it's available for use on laptops, Chromebooks, PCs, Macs at this time. Okay, so unfortunately, if parents have Android devices or they want to use it on their phone, it's not going to work at this time. We are working on that transition so that everyone can use it on Android devices. I think even after we make that transition, I wouldn't suggest that they try to use it on a phone. There are just so many times when those manipulatives are going to be really hard to use on those small screens, unfortunately. So remember, right now, iPads, laptops, PCs, Macs. So there is going to be an iPad code that's right here on the letter. So each school is going to have their own specific ones, by the way. And it also provides parents with information on how to set up their Family Insight dashboard. So parents can actually view their students' own progress, and this dashboard actually can be viewed on your phone, by the way. So if you have parents who have phone access and who have internet on their smartphone, they can access the parent dashboard. They'll just go to that internet address. They'll have the student log into their profile, and they'll set up the parent account. So let me actually show you those directions really quickly. So they'll go to the Dreambox login information that we give them on the account. They're going to log into their child's account, and then there's going to be a button at the bottom of the page that says Set Up Parent Access. They're going to follow the instructions to create the login using their email and password, and they're going to have to click yes, of course, to our terms of use and our privacy policy and click Submit. When students, when teachers, and parents log in, they can they can get into their child's address. The child's account to get the information. And Jeremy, you know what? I'm going to give you access to some parent information. And if you want to create your own letter that's less wordy, absolutely, you can do that. In fact, I'll make sure that you get a copy of the slide here, because I think that's probably the most pertinent information that you'll need so it doesn't overwhelm parents. All right, so I'm going to get into actually a dashboard that I've set up for one of my student accounts. So here. And I'm going to log in as a parent. So and when I log in as a parent from my account, I can either choose to have my student log in here. So there's my student, Mike Shu, or I can go to the family dashboard. And you'll notice this family dashboard is set up pretty much the same way as the student level of information that you would see from your teacher accounts. So I would have an overview tab that lets me know any alerts about the student. So Mike is not completing lessons. I can also see his progress and proficiency for any of the grade levels he's been working in. And I can also see the particular areas that he's been working on recently. The other tabs that are available to parents are activity, which shows us the lesson cards that represent the lessons that he's been working on recently. Standards breaks down standards, domains, clusters that he's worked on at any grade level. Usage gives us really quick little graphs that show when he's logged in. So he actually logged in today and played for 18 minutes. And then how many lessons were completed during that time. Now, here in Assign Focus, I can see the assignments that were made for Mike, but I can't adjust the assignments. I can't make assignments on my own for the student. That is something that we reserve for the teachers. But as a parent, I can review those assignments that have been made for my student. Also, one more feature is if I want Mike to go ahead and play, I can click on the Play Dreambox student account link, and then I can log in as Mike and he can play. So that is the parent dashboard. And now when students are actually going out, let's go back to the letter. When students are actually going out to play Dreambox, they can actually, they can log in from anywhere that they have internet access and a device. So if I'm a student who doesn't have access at home, I know one of the big urban school districts that I work with here in North Carolina, they actually work with the librarians to make sure that they can help the students get logged in. So students go into libraries and community centers where they have devices and internet access to go play Dreambox over the summer. That helps them combat that summer slump when students aren't in the schools every day. All right. Now, one other thing to mention about those parent accounts, when I sign up for a parent account, I can also sign up to receive emails from Dreambox. So those emails from Dreambox will tell me things like, here's one that I just got, Mike hasn't been logging into Dreambox. So I'll get an email from Dreambox saying, hey, it's been 5 days since Mike's been playing. Just thought you'd like to know. So that can be a nice way to motivate the students to play over the summer. The other email that we'll send out to parents is a congratulatory email. So recently, when Mike was playing, he actually finished a group of lessons. So he was working on multiplying rational numbers in decimal form. And so you can see in this email, it goes into detail about what exactly Mike did. So he was breaking these numbers down into smaller, more manageable pieces. And then those smaller pieces were combined to determine the product. So it's kind of a nice way to kind of clue our parents into what their students are really doing. Talks about the skills and the strategies they've acquired. So one of my favorite parts, though, is this. Toward the bottom of these emails, you'll often notice that we'll give them some helpful hints on ways that they can practice this skill or strategy or concept at home. And so here we're giving the parents some ideas on how to practice multiplying numbers in decimal form. So nice way to give your parents a helpful hint on how to get involved. It also can help change that dinner table conversation. What did you do on Dreambox? Nothing. Well, now they know. And also, just so you know, whenever we send these emails out, let me go back to the dashboard real quick. There's actually a note about those. Get my account back up. So when you look through, whoops, just close my dashboard. When you look through your dashboard and you see where a lesson group has been completed, so that will be noted by a card that has a green circle with a white check mark in it. See if I can find one. Then we're also going to include on that card the copy of the letter that we send home to parents. So here we go. So Sid completed addition and subtraction landmark numbers, and here we can view that letter that was sent to the parent. And as a teacher, it can also give me some helpful hints on how Dreambox addressed this and how I can continue to practice this skill, concept, or strategy with my students in the classroom too. So, all right. Now, I promised you some resources to help share this with your parents, and those are actually available in your dashboard. So from the Dreambox Access resources, that invitation letter to parents. And another spot you can go, if you go to the resource hubs in the top right-hand corner, and click on that, I'm going to go into the teacher hub. And then toward the bottom, in the Classroom Motivator section, we actually have a Family Math Night resource. Let me click on that. And this will bring you to the Family Math Night kit. And this kit has some great things to share with your parents. So it's got ideas for having Dreambox themed nights, things that you can do to get parents actually experimenting with Dreambox if you happen to have them in your classroom. And then there are also some resources, some PowerPoints, and that's actually where I got the slides that I shared with you all. So if I share that, if you open up that slide share, you can actually manipulate those slides. So I know that Jeremy was asking for something that was a little less wordy for a letter, so you can pull, one of those slides was that slide that I shared on parent access to the parent dashboard. So you can download that too. And there's also some quick videos that you can share on what Dreambox is and how kids use it. One thing I would stress with your parents is that we really need to make sure that they're using Dreambox appropriately with their students. So show you really quickly some expectations, and that's actually in the slide deck that I just showed you. So we want to make sure that only one person is playing on your child's account. That's the child. So even though we have parents who really, really love to be involved, it needs to be the kid who's answering the questions, making all those mouse clicks. I also want to emphasize, just as we do in the classroom, that if the student is starting a lesson, you need to complete it. Just like when they're in the classroom, if they're not completing it, we don't know what they need next. And then finally, make sure that they know it's okay to make mistakes. Let the parents know Dreambox loves mistakes. It helps us help the learner. If they're stuck, they use the help and hint button. And then they should get about 15-minute sessions, 15 to 20 minutes to play in Dreambox at one time so that they can get to those lessons completed. Now, I know sometimes you are going to have parents who say, well, but I want to get involved and I want to see what my kid is doing when they're working in Dreambox. They tell me about it. I'm really excited. Tell them that's okay. If you're really insisting on working with your child in Dreambox, have your kid explain what they're doing while they're doing it. We know that it's really powerful when kids bring those descriptions into the work that they're doing. So that if they're really insistent on getting involved, that's one way of allowing them to get involved in what the kids are doing in Dreambox. All right. And another resource that we have for you all, we've got a lot, is going back to your teacher hub, you all as a district have access to something called PD On Demand. PD On Demand is our own kind of choose your own adventure professional development. So when you click on this blue button, it will allow you to log in. And in PD On Demand, one of the modules that you'll see is actually called Making Math Real for Families. So this not only talks about how to present Dreambox with your families, but also how to present different topics in mathematics for the families. So there are 2 investigations in here for Making Math Real for Families. The first one is defining Dreambox and connecting with families, and the second is communication strategies. So these are some really great things to run through and work through on your own if you're kind of curious about different ways to talk about math with your families. Just there as an extra resource. All right, so that leads us to one of our final questions. And that is, so how is it that you, how do you share Dreambox learning with your families? Have you shared it? Or if you plan to share it in the future, how will you share Dreambox? And you're welcome to unmute yourself to chime in, or if you'd like to use the chat, welcome to do that as well. So awesome. I love to hear that you're sending letters home. Let them know they have access. Oh, and I love that idea. So great idea. Great for over breaks and a little extra practice. Yes. And you know what? I know you all are in a snowy region of the United States. We actually have some, we had some students who worked on this during snow days last year. In fact, we had kids, one kid last year who completed almost entire grade levels worth of work over a series of snow days because he enjoyed Dreambox and he had some extra time. It's really great for summer learning. Absolutely. It's a great way to keep those kids doing some math while they're out of school. Nice. Weekly homework assignments would be great too. Yeah, it's definitely, you do need to talk to parents about making sure that they don't play for them. That will disrupt the adaptive engine and impact what students see from Dreambox, which can lead to some frustration when they get back to school and mom and dad are no longer to help them, there to help them. So that is really important to share. All right. So last questions for you all. I just want to see if anyone has anything else they want to share, any questions that you have, anything that you've been thinking about during the webinar or curious about in Dreambox. You're welcome to either unmute yourself to ask your question or ask it through the chat. And if you wanted me to go over anything, let me know too.
I just accidentally something to just Denise. So last year we have a parent event at the beginning of the school year. It's in August at our minor league baseball team's home field, Frontier Field. And I'm just thinking that maybe if we could set up like 6 or 8 devices and use that as a station so parents could come by and see it and kids could actually jump on and try it and get excited about it at the beginning of the school year, right before the school year starts. Do you know of anyone that's done anything like that before?
That's awesome. I haven't. That's a great idea. I like it. Get that excitement building before the school year starts. Get students playing. And Jeremy had a, no, it's okay. So to answer your question, to get to the dashboard, you're going to go to play.dreambox.com. Oops, and I'm logged in right now. Let me log out real quick. You're going to get a screen like this. And Jeremy, if you haven't logged into your dashboard yet, you're probably going to need to reset your password. So when you go to play.dreambox.com, below the spaces for email address and password, there's a Forgot Your Password Educator link. I'm going to click on that. You'll submit your email address, and then it will email you directions on how to reset that password. So, great question. Thanks for asking. All right, and if you are good, just let me know.
Stacy, I think we're good. We really appreciate everything you're doing, and special thanks also to Larissa for everything she does and getting this set up, and thanks to all the teachers that are using this. We really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. And if you ever need anything, my contact information is up on the screen, as well as our client success team. If you have any questions about Dreambox, the client success team is great to get those questions answered. And you can also email me as well. So thank you all so much for letting me steal some of your precious time this afternoon.
Thanks, Stacy.
All right.